All the internal components of every single test taillight, especially the diffusers, remained completely intact. Conversely, on Karen's taillight, the diffusers were almost completely gone. Folks, understand something. If any part of that diffuser portion of the taillight is broken, there is no light.
Once that plastic diffuser is broken, it's like a fiber optic cable. Even if you put another piece up to it, it lights up a little bit, but it never lights up like a whole diffuser. Once it's cracked, it looks like that, and it stays that way unless you replace this whole piece, because once this is cracked, it's done. There's no more. It stops right where the crack is, but the light is still going down there. See how my fingers lit up? That light travels down the diffuser. But Karen's car is missing half of the one, and it's missing this whole one. See how the light stops? It just goes dark just by pulling the plastic away. Simple as that.
It doesn't illuminate at all. It's just black. Let's take a look at a couple of photos. At 5:07 a.m. at One Meadows, that's the photograph on the left. What do you notice about the right taillight? It's completely illuminated. Later, at 4:12 in the afternoon, photograph on the right, it's lit up. How can that be? How can that be if the Commonwealth claims that those diffusers, the portion that lights up the light, were already scattered all over 34 Fairview? That's their theory. But don't believe your lying eyes.
If you didn't catch that, I put out a video a month ago, Don't Trust Your Lying Eyes. That was a reference to my video.
The taillight's completely lit up. That would be impossible.
The taillight on the left is exactly how Karen's taillight would look right now if you was to put it in her car. Now, if you see the diffuser where the red circle is, one diffuser is completely broken and gone. The other one is halfway broken. They damaged the light in such a way that the bottom LEDs don't work and the bottom diffusers are gone. So when her car is going down the driveway, it looks like the one on the right side, but in actuality, the way her light would look right now plugged in is the one on the left. As you can see down the driveway, that is a working taillight.
HD, a biomechanist, explained that at those speeds, the other side of that coin, John's arm would be basically destroyed. Contusions, swelling, torn ligaments, hyperextensions, dislocation of joints and bones, fractured, broken, and shattered.
Now let's go over my friend's arm here. First of all, those two bones are broken. That was from the impact. His wrist is, I can't tell if it's broken or not, but his wrist is broken. Dislodged a bone. His thumb's broken. Mainly that bone, or those two bones are broken. The elbow is messed up, it's protruding. It's got a big chip out of it. Two fingers are damaged. That one's broken through. So we've got two fingers, two broken bones there, broken wrist, and a chipped elbow. That's all from a taillight at 25 miles per hour. And the taillight is indeed stronger than the arm, which I already figured it would be.
But as you know, John's arm was pristine, save those dog and claw bites. He didn't even have a bruise. Think about this. Think about that photo of those x-rays as you deliberate. You can manipulate a taillight fragment. That's not that hard. You can't manipulate a bruise. If they claimed the car was going fast enough to shatter the taillight and shatter the diffusers, then it was also going fast enough to destroy and shatter John's arm, and it simply did not. How do they square that? They don't, and they can't. So they spent nearly $400,000 of taxpayer money to hire someone to dress up and look like John and paint his arm blue, which told you exactly nothing. The ARCA testing, conversely, also established that it is impossible for John's sweatshirt sleeve to be damaged by an impact with the taillight. The Commonwealth's theory is that the sleeve of John's hoodie sweatshirt was damaged by flying shards of taillight slicing through the shirt and through John's arm. I have 3 questions. Number 1, John's arm had about 36 abrasions. How did 36 shards of acrylic go through 9 tiny little puncture holes? How'd that happen? Somebody needs to answer that. Number 2, why are there no slices or cuts in the hoodie? All the defects are punctures. Punctures that you might get from, say, I don't know, canine teeth.
All of these holes are in pairs. You can tell they're perfectly round, the same as dog teeth. That's exactly what they are. These are dog teeth. There is no way a car could do this. A car would cause tears and rips and would actually cut the material.
And number 3, if the shards cut bloody gouges into John's arm, that's their theory, why is there no blood, no skin, no tissue on a single shard of taillight that they claim came in contact with John's arm? The Commonwealth cannot answer a single one of those questions because John's arm was not impacted by the taillight. It doesn't make sense simply because it didn't happen. Compare and contrast the ARCA experts and their actual testing to Judd Welcher. He came to you in the Commonwealth's case in chief, and he told you that for the better part of $500,000, he'd come in and testify that John was tall enough to touch the taillight with his elbow. That's it. And even in that basic demonstration, he had to lean in to manipulate it, to get the results that he wanted. It was completely inverted, flipped backward, completely false. The test that formed the basis of their entire theory of the case. Watch closely as Dr. Welcher stands as a surrogate. Is that a righteous test, or is that a manipulation? Dr. Welcher tried to deceive and fool you by leaning into the car, manipulating the results of his own test. When the truth was revealed by Dr. Rentschler, the Commonwealth spent the next hour cross-examining him about how that test was meaningless. It actually didn't mean anything. Well, that's convenient now that we realize that it was a manipulated test, and it actually does mean nothing. It didn't represent the theory of the Commonwealth's case. That's what was suggested. That test does not represent the theory of the Commonwealth's case. Really? Then why was Dr. Welcher playing dress-up in John O'Keefe's clothes, or identical clothes to John O'Keefe, when he was holding a glass? Why was he holding the glass right behind the vehicle? And why was he standing with his right arm oriented to the right rear taillight if he wasn't trying to recreate the circumstance that is the Commonwealth's entire theory? The Commonwealth stood up here with a straight face and told you they weren't trying to suggest that that's how John was hit by the car. Of course they were trying to suggest that's their theory of the case. They only abandoned it 2 days ago when it was revealed by our experts that it's physically impossible. That silent witness, that science, that physics, has become very pesky to the Commonwealth because there was no collision. Dr. Welcher also told you under oath that there were no x-rays taken of John's arm. He tried to deceive you into believing that John's arm might have been broken. I don't know. I didn't see any x-rays, so I can't tell you what the damage was inside the arm. Really? The Commonwealth has had those x-rays in their possession for 3 years. And again, it took the defense to bring out the truth. The x-rays do not fit the Commonwealth's theory, so you weren't shown. And Dr. Welcher wasn't going to admit it. And my goodness.
What you are looking at is John O'Keefe's x-rays, not a single broken bone, not a single torn ligament.
Dr. Welcher then claimed that the reason he didn't do the reconstruction, the actual testing, think about what he said. There isn't enough evidence to determine what happened. I beg your pardon? What happens when there isn't enough evidence, in his words? You vote not guilty. That's what happens. John O'Keefe was inside, and the phone battery temperature further proves it. This is not speculation. This is science, and it's irrefutable. It tells us that he was not laying outside in the cold. He was inside somewhere a little bit warmer. Ian Whiffen told you that when the iPhone is exposed to freezing temperatures, think about these numbers. When the iPhone is exposed to freezing temperatures, it will drop from 81 to 21 degrees in 15 minutes. 15 minutes.
Now, I'm not going to make everybody sit through a long video and just watch a temperature gauge, so I'm going to speed it up to times 10, and I'll let you know now that it got down to the low temperature in 7 minutes and 8 seconds before I stopped the test. It would probably go -0 if I let the test keep going and if I had something cold enough, but I was just using a regular fabric, I guess a cold compress that was in the freezer, and I think it was 20 degrees, but you'll see how fast the phone gets down. Now, the temperature gauge, the first line is the back of the phone, the second line is the side of the phone, the bottom line is the actual battery temperature. The phone is under my back with the phone touching my back and the other part of the phone on the compress.
That's a 60-degree drop in 15 minutes. Now look at John's phone. It was laying, according to the Commonwealth, it was laying directly on frozen ground. He arrived at 34 Fairview and his phone dropped only 20 degrees over the course of an hour. Then inexplicably, it stayed steady, never dropping below 50 degrees for the next 4.5 hours. Never dropping below 50 degrees for the next 4.5 hours, basically through the entire night. He was not outside. He was someplace warmer, like a basement or a garage. Dr. LaPosada confirmed that John O'Keefe did not have hypothermia. No telltale signs, no telltale Wisniewski spots, no frostbite on any extremity. He did not die of hypothermia because he wasn't outside. Dr. Isaac Wolf, Dan Wolf, Elizabeth LaPosada, Judson Welcher, Andrew Rinchler, all agreed. Every expert agreed. This is how John O'Keefe died. A rearward fall from a standing position. What could make you fall straight back like that? Let's just think about that for a second. What could make you fall from a standing position as Judd Welcher just showed us? Standing up, falling straight back. Add a laceration to the right eye consistent with a fist or a punch, and you've got your answer. He certainly didn't sustain that wound on the back of his head by falling backwards onto a lawn. Dr. LaPosada told you that the patterned injury on the back of John's head could only be produced by hitting a hard, ridged, or ledged surface, like a concrete stair or step. What's just through that garage door? Michael Proctor never stepped down in that garage to find out. What a shame. You don't need the top experts in the country, but you had them. You don't need the top medical minds on the planet on this issue, but you had them. Dr. La Posada told you in probably the clearest voice in the entire trial. You remember her testimony. He didn't get hit by a car, in her words. He just didn't get hit by a car. You remember the question that was posed by Mr. Brennan, did you consider the speed of the vehicle? And she said, speed didn't matter, because he didn't get hit by a car. She repeated it 3 times because it's true, not just because she says so, but because the medical evidence proves it. The medical science proves it. There was no collision. Contrast that with the caliber and the quality of the experts who came in here to tell you what is obvious to anyone with common sense. Those wounds on his right arm are from a dog. This was not an oversight by the Commonwealth. It's just that there is no one out there, no matter how big a check you write. There's not a medical expert who's going to disagree with that. The fact is, this is the central fact in the case. The only fact that matters is literally uncontested by every medical expert. Uncontested, undisputed. There is no evidence that John was hit by a car. None. How much more reasonable doubt could there be? This case should be over right now. Done. Because there was no collision. So given all that, how did Karen Reed end up sitting here? Why is she even here? Why is she in that chair? Why is she in this courtroom? There is a reason for that. And it's a reason they don't want to tell you, and it's a reality they don't want to admit to. The reason we're here is because the system, the very system that was meant to protect her, that was meant to protect all of us, that system has failed badly. So now let's discuss the facts that were and were not presented by the Commonwealth in this case. Over the next few minutes, I want to talk about the utter failure of the police to investigate this properly and to investigate this fully. And what you're going to see is that Michael Proctor, the lead investigator for the Commonwealth, did nothing to actually and properly investigate this case. Let's start with the house. That's the most logical place to start. I think you'd agree. Brian Albert's house, where John's body was discovered lifeless in the lawn. A police officer is found dead on the front lawn, and no one secures the scene. No tape, no preservation of evidence, no crime scene log, no search warrants, no consent searches, no photographs of the house interior. They didn't treat the house as a crime scene, and shamefully, they didn't even treat the yard as a crime scene. The lame excuse offered by retired Lieutenant Gallagher, it was really cold and windy, and I didn't know if there was a crime that had been committed. What? You didn't know that a crime had potentially been committed? You have a man laying dead in the yard, and here are the undisputed facts that those officers were confronted with. Black eyes. Obviously, black eyes are consistent with a fight. Bloody nose, also consistent with a fight. Bleeding from the face, consistent with a physical altercation. A cut over the right eye, consistent with a punch. No coat in the freezing cold, not dressed for outside, dressed for inside. And one shoe on. I wonder where the other shoe could be. I don't know, maybe in the house 30 feet away. And then you find a broken and shattered drinking glass next to him, the type of glass that you might find, I don't know, let me think about this, in a kitchen in a house 30 feet away. And John's phone was tucked neatly under his back shoulder. Lieutenant Gallagher actually claimed he did not know it was a potential crime that needed investigating. The neighbor across the street, Detective Lieutenant Kelleher, had a ring camera that was pointed at the exact direction where John O'Keefe would have been hit, and nobody bothered to secure it. Nobody bothered to secure it. Nobody even bothered to look at it.
That ring camera would have absolutely have caught everything. There is no possible way that it could not have seen what happened that night. Just the angles and the direction of the house, it would be impossible that it didn't catch everything. And that's exactly why nobody ever got it. What a shame. That would have been all of the evidence they needed right there on that Ring camera, or actually Arlo camera. But no, they didn't get it.
Of course this was a potential crime scene. Of course it was. Let's not forget, this was Brian Albert's house, and that comes with privileges. End quote. That quote starts to make a little more sense now, doesn't it? What about the Ford Edge and that snowplow driver, Brian Loughran? He observed that Ford Edge parked outside Brian Albert's house at 3:30 a.m. That vehicle was moved directly in front of where John's body was found sometime between 2:30 and 3:30 in the morning. The only person connected to a car of that make and model, Brian Albert. Michael Proctor did nothing to investigate that point. Did nothing to investigate whose Ford Edge was parked in a spot specifically to block the line of sight in the exact position where John's body would be later found by Karen Reed. Why didn't he want to speak to the snowplow driver, Brian Loughran? Why did he falsely claim that no one plowed the roadway that morning? When police dash cam video, you saw the dash cam, it shows plows going back and forth all morning. Why did he wait so long, years even, to interview Heather Maxson and Ryan Nagel, individuals who were literally outside 34 Fairview at the exact same time John and Karen arrived at Brian Albert's house that night? Brian Loughran, had he been investigated or interviewed, would have told Michael Proctor that he drove past the lawn multiple times on January 29th, and there was no body on the lawn. There was no body there. Heather Maxson and Ryan Nagel would have told him that they arrived at 34 Fairview shortly after Karen and John pulled up behind them, and they would have told Michael Proctor, at least Heather would have told Michael Proctor, that when she left 10 minutes later, she drove past the SUV and observed Karen Reed in the driver's side, dome light on, passenger seat empty. So where was John? He wasn't outside, wasn't sitting down, wasn't laying down. There's only one place he could be. We could all say it together if you could talk with me. He was in the house. But Michael Proctor did not want to have those answers. He did not want to have to disclose those answers. He didn't want the truth. As you well know, no one searched the house for signs of a struggle. Not that night, not the next day. I'm talking about 34 Fairview. Not ever. Not once. Not with a warrant, not with consent. They never went into the basement, the stairwells. They didn't look at the walls. They didn't look in the garage. Nothing was ever examined. Nothing was checked for blood. Nothing was checked for DNA. They didn't look for a ledged or ridged surface. Zero. You'll remember how surprised Jennifer McCabe was to recall that there was a garage door even on the house. Except this was her sister's house. She's been going to that house since she was 5. She's seen that house. She's been in and out of that house hundreds of times, maybe thousands of times. She's been going to that house her entire life, and yet she acted surprised when I asked her about it. Remember Jennifer McCabe's answer when I asked her whether there was a door to the garage. I was asking her about the front door, the side door, and the garage door, and her answer was, oh, actually there is a garage door right there. Investigators never opened that door. Let's change the scenario. What if it wasn't the house of a Boston cop? What if it wasn't the house of Brian Albert? We can be certain that investigators would have torn that house apart to get answers about why a fellow police officer was laying dead on the homeowner's lawn. You can betcha. But because this was Brian Albert's house, a Boston cop, nope. And because he was a fellow cop, an insider, they didn't even open the door. That is not justice, folks. That's just pure favoritism. You heard evidence that Higgins and Chief of Police Kenny Berkowitz, also good friends, were in the Sallyport together with the SUV for a, quote, wildly long time. Kelly Dever, another Boston cop, told you that. She also told law enforcement agents that she found it, quote, weird that Higgins could have access to that very sensitive evidence, the SUV. Folks, there is never a situation in which a witness, a potential suspect even, should be given access to the evidence in a case. But that's exactly what happened here. Higgins was given unfettered access to that SUV and its taillight nearly immediately, according to Kelly Dever's statement to law enforcement. And it was at that exact time, the exact moments that Higgins would be in that Sallyport, that the 42 minutes of the Sallyport video is just missing. It's just gone, vanished. Well, that's convenient. Now put in context the condition of that taillight when it was actually seized in Dighton. It was cracked, but not completely damaged. I ask you to compare and contrast Officer Kelly Dever, her attitude, her demeanor. That's all for you to judge. Her attitude, her demeanor, her truthfulness, her motives from the witness stand. Compare and contrast that to Sergeant Nick Barrows. Who's more believable? Officer Barrows is unattached to any of the players in this grand play directed by Michael Proctor. He's truly independent. And what did he tell you? Was the taillight, he was asked, was the taillight in this condition when Michael Proctor picked up that SUV at 412? His answer? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It was cracked, but not completely damaged, not smashed out like that. So how did the taillight get cracked? How did it end up in the condition where it was cracked, as Officer Barrows saw it, but not completely damaged? Well, you don't have to guess. There's a video. Just watch. That's how it got cracked. And Judson Welcher's own recreation confirms it. Look at the contact. That's from the Commonwealth's expert. And that further is confirmed by the fact that there were no taillight pieces found in any of the initial searches conducted at the scene. 2 searches, 50-foot area searched. Not a single fragment was found until after Michael Proctor had access to and control of that SUV and its taillight. One of the most dramatic moments probably of the trial, Kelly Dever. How can you trust this investigation when you saw how far a police officer will go? You had a front row seat to the power of police manipulation and police corruption. A front row seat. Kelly Dever was interviewed by a separate law enforcement agency, not a friendly department, not Boston Police Department, not Michael Proctor's MSP, a different independent agency. She told those law enforcement agents in a formal interview that she saw Brian Higgins and Chief Kenneth Berkowitz alone in the Sallyport with the SUV. She was detailed, she was clear, she was unequivocal, she remembered the specifics, she recalled how it made her feel, quote, weird. She recalled how long Higgins spent, a quote, wildly long time, as she described. These are all incredible details to tell law enforcement. She couldn't have been clearer. She couldn't have been more specific. But then she's put on a witness list and she's subpoenaed by the defense. Oh boy. Then this rookie cop was called up to the police commissioner's office. The same commissioner that was the boss of Brian Albert. They have a meeting, a private meeting. And he says, wink, wink, nod, nod, we support you, Officer Dever. What else was said in that meeting? What else is reasonable to believe was said in that meeting? She claimed she couldn't remember. She claimed not to remember if he instructed her to do the right thing. But the commissioner of the Boston Police Department certainly said something to this rookie cop, and all of a sudden, that detailed, unambiguous, unequivocal statement to law enforcement became, what did she say? A false memory. Not I didn't say it. She admitted she said it. She admitted she detailed the entire story. She just said, It's a false memory. What? So she's called to the commissioner's office to make sure that she would do the right thing. That's why she was called. And now we know what that means. In her words, my entire career depends on what I say here on the stand. I'll quote that again. Quote, my entire career depends on what I say here on the stand. You bet it does. That's how it works. And that's how we got here. Why would the Commonwealth stoop to a stunt like that? It's desperation. They know what you now know, what their experts know. There was no collision. Could you ever say to yourself, this is justice? The fact is there was no collision. A car did not kill John O'Keefe. So I ask you, let your voice be heard, not in whispers, but in truth. Let the community feel, through your verdict, that justice cannot be bent and that it will not be buried. Find Karen Reed, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. Thank you.